Good afternoon, everyone. We are going to give maybe about a minute and a half before we actually start, give people a little bit more time to sign in. Okay, why don't we go ahead and get started? Good afternoon. My name is Sophia Gallimore, and I'm the director of the Watertown Transportation Management Association. And we'd like to welcome you here today for the first of about six biking series. I will be supported here today on the webinar by Lexi Santiago. Hi, Lexi. And with us today, we have Bert Smith, who is the founder of NEMO, and Colette Sturgis, who is the head of operation and bicycle mechanics. So for today's first webinar, it's going to be on 2026 winter biking basics. And you will learn a little about why bike in the winter, how to dress for the ride, cold weather gear essentials, bike setup and equipment, salt, snow, and bike care, and safety and confidence. So let's sit back. I will turn this over to Worth and Colette and hope you guys enjoy.
Thank you, Sophia, for the kind intro. I'm going to get this deck visible for you all. All right. So, as Sophia said, today we're going to be talking about winter biking basics. And I'm Worth.
I'm Colette.
And before we get into the winter biking basics, I just wanted to give you and anyone a quick background on NEMO. So we run a sort of mobile repair business. It's a unique model. We use these electric cargo bikes that you can see in the picture to go around and do repairs. We do it as a sort of like roadside assistance thing for companies. We do events and things like that. We're fully mobile, but we're based out of Longwood, near the Longwood Child Care Center, if you know where that is. And right now we're beginning a series of events with the Watertown TMA in the city of Watertown. And so you'll probably be seeing us more often. Also, we recently, about 3 weeks ago, expanded into Watertown. We have a service area, so we were fully mobile. So we'll go around to any of these places. And we haven't completely announced it yet, but it would be silly for us to do this presentation to this audience and not tell you all that, yes, you can call us if you need something. You'll get more details about it, over the next few weeks. But yeah, we're very excited to be covering all of Watertown. And if you're someone who works in Watertown but lives in one of these other areas, we can meet you at home too, or on the side of the road, or when you're taking people to appointments or whatever. What we're going to talk about today, Colette and I joked that we could give an hour presentation on any one of these bullets, basically. And so we're going to, kind of go high level with a lot of them, But then if you have specific questions or, comments, or you want a brand recommendation or an opinion, just please put something in the chat and we'll make sure we get to all those at the end. We'll have like a Q&A. But first, we'll be talking about safety, sort of like the key seasonal differences. What's the difference between biking in May and biking in January? There's a difference between biking in February than there is in biking in December. There's different things. Bike maintenance, what happens to your bike in the winter, what else needs to be done, dressing for comfort. And then we want to go through a handful of different equipment that people talk about, and just give you our thoughts on each of these items, whether you really need them or not, which are most important, how to think about it. And then also some sort of like digital resources. These ones are not necessarily like super winter biking focused, but they will make it easier to commute in sort of all scenarios.
Okay, so in safety, the general, like the biggest things that are going on is that it gets dark super early. It's getting a little bit later sunset every day, but it's still like only 5:30 or so that it starts to get dark. That's still well within a lot of people's commuting time. So it's dark outside. It's harder to see in general. It's harder to see you because if you don't have lights or a high vis, it's really easy for a bicycle to disappear on the side of the road. So always you want to have like a good rear light, like a red light that is bright in the back and a white light that's in the front. I like to say that I like to think of it that there are two kinds of headlights for a bike. There's ones that make you seen, and there's ones that help you see. So like I like to have two. One that's pointed straight forward, and it's just well lit so that I can see in front of me. I can see if there's ice, I can see if there's potholes or like anything that's going on, like piles of snow that I didn't expect. But also a lot of people like to have a blinking light as well, just because it helps with some visibility to have a light that is changing. So having a light that's pointed a little higher, it doesn't need to be as bright, because it's mostly the visual changes that's going to be visible. So like I have one light that's lighting up the road, that one's steady, and I have a second light that's blinking so that it's a reminder to cars, pedestrians, anybody who's around, like there is a bike that's moving. It's especially helpful because nothing else on the road tends to have blinking lights other than bikes, I find. So it's a pretty common visual cue to people like, oh, there's bikes around here. Second thing that happens is road conditions. Especially this winter, there's been a lot of storms, and I think there's going to be a few more this week. I don't think it's going to let up very much. I think it's going to be a very wet, very snowy winter. So what happens is the roads get tighter because even when things are plowed, it's still like a foot off of the curb of snow piles. So a lot of the times your side gutter bike lanes, those get a little bit smaller. What I find is that sometimes it's a lot safer to just get right into the middle of the road. You always have the legal right to do so. You can take the road, and it's called vehicular cycling. It's treated as if the bike is a car. It follows all the car rules. And so that's when it's especially important to be visible. So like having something that's reflective, some kind of reflective vest or a reflective tape on your helmet, on your bike, wherever, having lights that make you visible, especially if you're going to be taking into the road. But it also helps you be seen more. If you're tucked away to the side, you're a little more hidden. If you're right in the middle, no one can miss you. Another thing is the bike behaves differently. This is mostly about the two big things are brakes. When they get wet, they tend to brake a little worse. So rim brakes that clamp on the side of your wheel, when those get wet, your stopping distance when you slam on the brakes could be almost twice as long. So you want to brake early. And disc brakes tend to be a little bit better overall, but they'll still get really squeaky. They'll still brake a little bit worse. And then another thing that you want to be keeping an eye on is ice on the road. When there's ice or slush or anything that makes your stability and your grip on the pavement a little bit worse, the best advice I can give is to only do one type of acceleration at a time, if that makes sense. So what I consider acceleration is speeding up, slowing down, or turning. So acceleration in the physics sense. So if you're turning and you're speeding up, that means your wheel is spinning faster than you're turning, and it's easier for it to slip out. The same is true if you brake and turn at the same time. You can lock up the wheel, and then it'll slip out from under you as you turn. So what I do when the road conditions are bad is you're going to speed up when you're in a straight line, slow down, like if you're coming up on a turn, like on a right turn, let's say, you're going to slow down before you turn, get to a very safe position, like a very safe speed, and then you're going to turn at a single speed. And then once you've fully completed that turn, then you can speed back up. So I like to do just one of those at a time. If you do two, you have a little bit worse control over it. The last thing about safety is, in general, just about like cars, what the car drivers are paying attention to. In the spring and the summer and fall, there are so many bicyclists around Boston. So everybody knows to look out for them. In the winter, I find that more drivers they're expecting, they're not expecting bikes anymore. They're expecting it to be too cold, and you don't see as many bikes around in general. So it's easier for if you're in the blind spot of a car, they're not expecting you to be there as much. So that's, again, just another example of why it's extra important to be visible, because people aren't really expecting you to be there as much as they would in the spring or summer. Winter biking maintenance is a bit of a contentious topic because the the wear on your bike in the winter is going to be a lot higher than any other season. It's because of all the wet, all the salt and snow, and road chemicals and salt on the gears of your bike, on the chain, on your brakes. It's just going to wear everything down a lot faster. So in general, what I like to recommend is, if you've got major overhaul repair, like you need a new chain, you need a new freewheel, you need new this and that, I wouldn't do it in the middle of winter. I wouldn't do it at the beginning of winter. If it's something that is not an emergency, but it is like, I know I need to replace my chain, and it's still February, and I know there's going to be another month of salt on the road, it's a little bit better to just wait until spring, because if I put a new chain on right now, um, then what's going to happen is it's going to be covered in salt, it's going to get rusty, and I'm going to put a brand new part on there and then immediately get it super worn down with salt. So usually I wait until sometime in March, when I start to believe that it's just going to be rain from now on. It's not going to be so much salt and ice on the roads. That being said, there are some things that you always want to keep an eye on, and that's your brakes and like basic maintenance. So your brakes are important because, like I said, your braking is worse in the wintertime in general. So making periodic checks to look at your brakes, like if it feels like it's worth taking a peek at to see like, oh, do I have some brake pad material on my brakes? If you've got rim brakes, they usually have a little line on them. It's a wear line, and once it's clear, you'll see like, oh, I need to replace these. There's not enough rubber there anymore. For disc brakes, it's a little harder. You need to shine a flashlight down and see if you can see enough brake pad material. And if you don't know, it's always worth going into a shop and saying like, is this a problem? And they're usually pretty honest. If they've got time to just like look down, it only takes a minute to check, and they could usually give you some good advice about it.
Yeah, a quick note about what Colette's talking about is, we will be, working on someone's bike in like December, and we'll see, hey, these components are like a little bit worn out. And typically we'll try to give them some thoughts on, well, how much do you ride? How much are you expecting to ride this winter, as to whether they should upgrade their stuff immediately or wait until the spring. There's obviously situations where it's unsafe if they don't get a new chain or it won't function and things like that. So what I will say is, um, you know, ask a mechanic, ask someone that who maybe is more experienced about bikes, give us a call or something like that. Because I don't want to be like telling you, oh, well, they told me to not replace my stuff, during the winter because it's a waste or whatever. But if you're riding something that's unsafe, that obviously is a an exception to that rule.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't want to say like leave your bike rusted outside and then have to kick it to work every day because the chain isn't turning. Like obviously there are exceptions, but if it's minor repair and it's going to happen, the best time for like the yearly tune-up for like the full overhaul at a shop, the best time is in the spring. Because then you get all spring, summer, and fall of riding essentially what feels like a brand new bike. Um,
What I would also say about that is that's not necessarily a secret. And so if you're trying to get a full tune up, getting one in May is really, really hard. Getting one in April is really, really hard. So, and this because, the shops just have, limited capacity as to how much work they could do. So if you really, I would go maybe March, even, yeah, I'll probably do March. Because once you get to April and May, you'll start calling these places and they'll be like, it's a 3-week wait, or something like that. And 3 weeks during May without your bike is that's a shame.
Yeah, it's really good advice. Before we go on this, as far as regular maintenance that you do want to make sure you do during the winter time is mostly it's on your chain and your brakes. So like I said, your brakes will get dirty. It's just going to happen. There's no avoiding it. Salt and like the oils of the road tend to stick to the metal on your brakes. That's true of rim brakes and disc brakes. If you've got either of those, the best way to clean it is with like a clean rag. So I just take an old t-shirt that I was going to get rid of anyway, and I cut it into a bunch of squares, and that works perfectly fine. And you want to use isopropyl alcohol. You don't want to use soap or anything with oil on your brakes because oil is going to make it slicker. And soap, some of them are good, but some of them will leave some material on the metal, and that'll make them squeak. It'll make them work a little bit worse. Isopropyl alcohol, it will dissolve most materials that get on it, like most oils, it'll soak it up, and it'll dry completely clean. So we use a 70 to 90% isopropyl alcohol and just spray it all over the wheel. If you've got rim brakes, spray it all over the rim and then wipe it clean until what you're wiping is clean on the rag instead of all dirt. Same is true with disc brakes. You just want to be a little extra rigorous about it because even a little bit of material on there, your brakes will get really, really, really squeaky. They'll still perform pretty well most of the time, but you want to make sure you get it really clean every once in a while. And then with your chain, on like especially wet days, especially like after a snowstorm, if there's like a few days that you're still riding, I wipe the chain down almost every day if it's especially wet. So I just take the same kind of idea is an old rag, an old t-shirt, and you want to wipe down the chain at the very least with that rag, and then put on a chain lubricant. There's two kinds of lubricant. There's a wet lube and a dry lube. I tend to use a dry lube all through winter. Dry means it's made for dry conditions. A wet lube means it's made for wet conditions. Wet lube is a lot stickier and it's a little bit trickier to put on, but it does tend to stick onto your chain a little bit better in wet conditions. So it might last a little longer if you want to try that out. The only thing is you want to be really careful. You don't want to put too much on the chain, and then you want to wipe it off totally clean after you lubricate it. So two big things: clean your brakes, clean your brake surface, so if it's the rim or the discs, and then wipe down and then lubricate your chain And after you've lubricated it, you want to wipe off any excess. Because if there's a lot of excess oil on the chain, it's just going to pick up a lot more dirt and it'll get sticky once again.
One quick question just to make sure that we're super clear about this. For disc brake maintenance, you're recommending isopropyl alcohol on the pads and the rotor?
It's going to be hard to clean the pads, unless your pads get really contaminated, like if no amount of cleaning is fixing it. It's hard to clean them just because they're a small area and inside when the wheel is on. I find that most of the time, some basic cleaning of just the disc is enough. So just clean the metal off, and then as you're biking, it'll get less squeaky. Like 90% of the time, just cleaning the metal disc is enough. If that's not working, I would actually recommend talking to a shop about it, because it could be that the rotors or that the brakes are like really contaminated. In that case, you can't really clean them because of the material that it is. You need to sand a bit off and then put them back in, or you need to put on new brake pads. So if no amount of cleaning is help, it's worth going to a shop. Okay, so comfort is something that I still struggle with. But the best advice that I can give, and I've been slowly getting better, is layering. So having one really massive winter coat that you put over a t-shirt and then bike to work is going to be really tough. The reason being is that as you bike, you're going to start to sweat. And if you sweat, then you get cold. And so if you over cover yourself, you might end up colder than if you just wore a lot less. So I like to start the ride cold, because I'm expecting that as I bike to work, as I bike to wherever I'm going to heat up a bit just through action. When I think of layers, I'm thinking like, oh, if I'm too hot, I can take off this outer layer because it's not raining. I can get a little bit more airflow, but I still have a sweater on, I still have a vest, and I still have good gloves. So it's like I can take off one layer and regulate the heat if I planned poorly, or even if the weather is just weird that day. You never really can tell. Important layers to have are like some kind of base layer that covers everything. Like I've got this long sleeve shirt, something that covers your whole torso. And then I like to have a warm vest, because if you keep your core warm, then the blood moving to the rest of your body will, as you move, it'll keep you warm. And then your extremities, so like your hands and your feet, you want to have like warm enough footwear, and then warm enough gloves. I wear ski gloves in the winter. I even have gloves that you can put a little heat pack in the palm so that it keeps your hands warm, because I find that no matter what I do, I'm pretty tall, and so at the end of my extremities, it's just not warm anymore. And then protecting your face from the wind. I tend to wrap a scarf in such a way that it's covering my face, covering my nose and mouth, and then like wrapping around my head. Another really easy way to do it is with a skiing balaclava that just like covers the face, something with vent holes so that you can breathe out through your mouth and not fog up your goggles. Which brings me to my next thought, is goggles. I like to wear glasses year round when I'm biking, just for like dirt and dust. But in the wintertime, I switch to ski goggles or safety goggles. Getting a pair of like ski goggles that are, I don't use tinted ones because I ride in the dark as well. But something that covers your whole like eyesight. Ski goggles are great because they have side visibility too, so I can see pretty well out the side, and they're sealed, so there's no wind that's cutting into my eyes. And when I forget them, I notice, because the cold wind on your eyes and like any sort of water and road spray just like constantly hitting your eyes, you got to blink all the time, and it reduces your visibility and it makes everything a whole lot worse. So that's your face. And your hands, I like to have really good gloves because it's tough. It's tough to keep your hands warm no matter what. And then a backup plan is the thought of like sometimes like you always want to have an emergency backup plan just in case. Like, is there a bus that you can take home from work if it's like really that bad? If you're expecting a light drizzle, but there's like freezing rain, or if you thought it would be a flurry, but it's just a genuine snowstorm going on and there's 2 inches of snow on the ground. Um, it's always good to have some kind of backup plan just in case, because like there are conditions that vary, that like, oh well, I can work with this, I'm just going to go slower. There's also backup plans of like, usually I go on the main road, but today, because it's a little worse, I'm going to take a longer route that just goes on this bike path that I know is paved. And you know, it takes 30 minutes instead of 20 to bike home from work, but that's fine. I'm seeing a question on how to avoid goggles fogging up, and that is a tough question. Um, the two answers are, there are certain balaclavas that just have a totally open mouth, and they seem like they would be less warm, but it's actually kind of nice because getting some cool air in and out can feel good. And that'll keep, if it's a totally open mouth, then breathing out, there's nothing that's going to go up into your goggles. The other way that I do it is, since I mostly ride with a scarf that I've wrapped around, I just wrap it in such a way that there's a sort of bubble, if you can imagine, around, like I'm not tight up to my mouth. If it's tight up to my mouth, then as condensation builds up, there's nowhere for the air to go but up into your goggles. So you're trying to avoid hot air going up into the goggles. And I find that if you can tie a scarf in a way that leaves some space up in front, it gives some space for the air to dissipate before it goes up. Um, I'm not sure if that makes sense. And if you try it and it's still not working, the last piece of advice that I know I have is, there are in sports stores, you would find these, like sports stores where you might find ski goggles, there's a spray compound that you spray onto goggles. It's like an anti-fog material, and you put that on the inside and the outside, and it usually helps pretty well. Some people also say putting on dish soap, I think, but don't quote me on that actually. I I can't remember exactly what it was, but there are a couple tricks to keep things from fogging up a little more. But the biggest thing you can do is just direct the airflow somewhere else. So give it a lot of space, or have a balaclava that has air holes to work with. All right, equipment is a big one in the wintertime because you're going to wear a lot of equipment. I like to joke that I put on a spacesuit every time I go for a bike ride. The big ones, bike lights. Like I said, I like to have two. One that is bright so I can see, one that is blinking for visibility. Um, and then in the rear, you want to have, at the very least, a bright red light. Some of them blink, some of them don't. I haven't really noticed a difference in like visibility of when mine can either blink or be just like straight on. I haven't noticed a difference, but the most important thing is that you have it. It's also good to have backups for your lights. Having just one means, like, if I forgot to charge it one day and then I know I'm going to be out late, like there's really nothing I can do, and I would be scared the whole ride home that I'm not visible enough. Having a backup light that like maybe you keep in a work desk drawer, or in a wherever you keep your bike at home, or in your backpack, just like sitting in the bottom. Having an extra backlight and a front light means that just in case um, something dies, you have a replacement. They're also important because in the cold weather, batteries don't last as long as they do in the summertime. So you're going to have to charge your bike lights more often. So I like to always have a backup just in case something goes wrong. High vis and reflectors is, I think, a great thing to have. There's tape that you can get. I put it on my helmet on the front and back. The higher up you can get your reflection, your lights, your high vis stuff, the better. Because if it's really low to the ground, like if you only have high, like reflective tape on your fenders, like on the wheels low to the ground, really tall cars aren't going to see that. It's not actually going to add that much visibility. So some of the best things you can have are those safety vests that are just like, some strips of high vis stuff. That way you can put it over your layers, and then you can take off some layers and you can put that vest back on. I have a big winter coat that's got reflectors on it, but when I get too warm, I can't take it off. And so there's give and take. I think a vest would be a lot more versatile. I can use it in any weather for visibility. And then having extra layers like at work or wherever your destinations are, if you've got a space where you can keep some stuff. Because some days you might come in and realize like, oh, there's a cold spell this afternoon. It was 20 when I came in this morning, but it's going to be 0 on the ride home. What am I going to do about that? I don't know. Or you bike to work and you bike through like 6 puddles and now your socks are soaked. Keeping extra layers, extra socks, things like that at your destination is such a lifesaver, or it can be such a lifesaver if you've got the right things where you're going. Waterproof layers, same thing. You never know when it's going to rain. You never know it's going to be that wet outside. I think that goggles and glasses are a must for wintertime. It's what I was saying in the last slide. It keeps the wind out of your eyes. It keeps salty water kicked up from cars or whatever, keeps that out of your eyes, and it keeps everything visible. Backups of everything, that's what I was saying with the bike lights and with the layers, having like extra things in case something gets wet, in case something dies. Keep it at home, at your destination if you can. If you've got a backpack that you take everywhere, just like throw a couple things in there just in case. Fenders is really low on the list, but is really important. They're essentially the covers for your wheels. And in the wintertime, with all of this mud and salty water, if you don't have fenders covering your wheels, then it'll stick to your tires and flick all the way up. I've got one coat that is totally covered in mud on the back because I have one bike that doesn't have fenders and I ride it in the wintertime. And it will also kick up from the front wheel, it'll kick up onto your feet. It'll get your feet soaked in your pants, soaked with mud. So having some kind of cover of fenders on your bike is such a blessing to have. If there's only one thing, actually, no, I don't know if there's only one thing from this that you take away, but this is a big one to take. Our last section here is on studded tires. The question mark is because it's a conversation. There's a give and a take to studded tires. And personally, I don't use them, but I know people who do. What studded tires are is in the rubber of the tire, there are tiny little metal studs. Sometimes they're literally tiny screws that are poking out. And what it does help with is on like thicker snow and ice, where the rubber might slip, the studs will cut into the ice, will cut into the snow a little bit better, and you have better grip on ice and snow. However, it also you get slightly worse grip on clean pavement. So clean pavement also includes when it's wet pavement. So because the reason that that's happening is rubber against pavement is the best quality grip that you can have, and interrupting that with metal, which can slip on pavement, means grip is a little bit worse. I think that the benefit of studded tires really only lasts until the roads are paved. So if some of these like slightly further from the center of the city bike paths, those sometimes take a while to get paved. And with studded tires,
plowed
or getting plowed,
cleared.
sorry.
Cleared
yeah,
from
getting
snow.
cleared from snow. And so studded tires might help when there is a layer of packed snow that lasts for 2 weeks. Um, it is a benefit. So some of these paths further out, I know the Arlington bike path took a little while to get cleared. I'm not sure if it is cleared by this point. So studded tires might help if that's a major part of a commute, is one of these paths that doesn't get cleared. If you're riding into the city, though, I don't think they're really that helpful, because once it gets the first plow, the first layer cleared away, you actually lose the benefit of studded tires. It's extra maintenance, it's extra upkeep. Um, a lot of people forget to put on their studded tires until the first big snowstorm, and then they're rushing to put it on. It's a lot of extra effort, um, where it could be beneficial depending on your commute, but I think as a general rule, I don't find them necessary.
Yeah, I think the folks that we see putting on studded tires the most tend to be parents who are riding cargo bikes. They're extra concerned about their children's safety and those kinds of things. And it's also worth noting that riding on studding tires is less comfortable. The actual ride quality is worse. Um, and so it's always a little bit, I don't want to call it a gamble, but it's always a little bit of like, when you're putting them on for the season, you're a little bit guessing about how much snow there's going to be and how bad road conditions are going to be. Winter like this one, it was probably a pretty good idea. But winter like last winter, it was like not really, or like some of the previous winters we've had. So that's something to consider. And it does depend on sort of like what your exact risk tolerance is in your riding situation.
If you decide against studded tires and just keep the same all year tires on your bike, um, I think that it's worth like keeping an eye on your route. So if you do take some of these like totally separated bike paths, like the Somerville Community Path or the Arlington, is that the Minuteman? What is the Arlington bike path called? But these totally separated bike lanes might they tend to get cleared a little bit later than the main roads. So on days immediately after snowstorms, I'll modify my commute. I'll try to pay attention and add 10 minutes, like leave 10 minutes earlier than I would normally, to see like, well, if my usual path isn't cleared yet, I don't have studded tires, so I can't just plow through it. But I know I can go around, take this central road, take a left here. It'll take a little longer, but that's fine. And just like add in some time. You never know what roads are going to be better, what roads are going to be worse. And if you ever, if you get too far, you make a mistake and the road's not that great, you can always walk it. You can just get off, hop on the sidewalk, and walk the quarter mile until you see another road that's worth riding on.
So that's about it for the equipment section. But one thing I always like to talk about is backups again. I'm just, if you find a piece of equipment that you're like, wow, this is essential to me biking in the winter, you might want to procure a backup to keep at the office or something like that, because people forget stuff. I forget stuff. And you never know what your commute in is going to be like. You could end up getting much stuff soaked, and there's no way at your office or wherever you're going to get it dry by the end of the day. And so just having extras of a lot of things is really useful. And I think one of the easiest things to have extras of are like bike lights, because they're really small, or those vests, because you can buy them pretty cheap online or whatever, and you can crumple it up into a ball and put it in the back of the bottom of your backpack or whatever, and then hopefully you never need to pull it out, but the day that you forget it, you have one, right? And you know that you're going to be visible. So can't recommend that enough, basically.
Is there a good place to find out road conditions? I just noticed there are some more questions. Is there a good place? That might actually be in the next.
Yeah, we're going to go over some digital resources um, that we think are useful, mostly year round, but particularly to what I think Saul has mentioned in here, one of them in here, for bike related stuff in general. Just if you're following the TMA on Instagram, you'll see announcements about other webinars and things like that. These kind of have a broad span. The Cargo Bikes of Camberville Facebook group, if you're a Facebook person, this is a community of mostly parents who ride cargo bikes. And you don't have to have a cargo bike to be part of this group and to get the wonderful advice. A lot of these folks are people who, they're, car free or one car household. And so they're really using a lot of this infrastructure regularly. And you will see updates of someone saying, hey, the Minuteman's really dangerous right now. Watch out for this turn here. There's a lot of folks that donate a lot of their, free time to, educating people, raising awareness. They're contacting, the city about different things. That's also a great group to ask questions like, hey, will these bar mitts fit on this bike, or certain things like that? Or are there brands that people recommend for balaclavas or whatever? Or, especially for the parents, if there's a lot of people who will post, how do I keep my kids warm in biking in the winter? They're not pedaling at all. Like, I feel like they're going to be freezing. That people will have recommendations for blankets and all different kinds of things like that. So that is a great community resource on Facebook if you're a Facebook user. The Guided Ride series, this is a bike ride series that a Better City TMA, but broadly all the TMAs have access to, where we lead rides. And one of them starts actually in Watertown Square through different new infrastructure that's been built. Those rides will start again in a few weeks. But there's also on the website, you can see the routes. They have basically different maps that you can take, ride with GPS maps, and you can go and do the series by yourself. The Points app is a biking specific app where basically it's sort of like a Google, it's sort of like a Waze app for cycling, where basically people will report which infrastructure makes them feel uncomfortable, and then you can like design your routes to be more comfortable. So that's a cool app. The Bike Lane Uprising app, if there is constantly obstructions in your neighborhood or in your commute, and you want a place to report it to, like a public database that cities can access or whatever, you can take pictures and upload those there. I put some resources for like Watertown specifically here. When we're talking about like, maybe a community path isn't cleared or there's a really bad intersection, contacting the city first is a great thing to do. And I just read earlier today that you can now actually text the Watertown TMA line. So that's the number you can call or text them. I texted them. I said, can I submit photos on here? And yes, you can. So it can be a kind of thing where like, I know I don't like to use my phone when I'm riding, but sometimes if I see something that I think is unsafe, I'll pull my phone out, take a picture, and then when I get to my destination, I'll submit it and I'll say, hey, this was going on at this location. This sign is broken, or, this isn't working. And it's always good to give the city's feedback on what's going on. If only to provide the data point. If the city doesn't agree with you and like, I don't think we need to change that. Well, maybe 5 years later, 10 people have also made this recommendation and they want to take a closer look. There's also a mobile app for Watertown, and then they have on the website, the Report It system. So when it comes to winter infrastructure that you feel is like unsafe or not being kept up, the best thing you can do is submit it to the city. And if you're not getting, the sort of response that you want, a lot of people are, talk about this stuff in the Facebook groups and things like that and try to figure out how to organize to get the attention to get certain problems solved. So there are things that you can do. You don't have to feel hopeless or whatever. Then the final one is Go Mass Commute, which the Watertown TMA will be rolling out, I think, in the next few months. But it has a lot of sort of like biking benefits and resources. So I'm sure you'll hear more about that in the future.
Yeah. I also want to point out this, in case anyone's not looking at the chat, to check out Zeke Ramel, Senior Transportation Planner at City of Watertown. Check that chat out too, that you can email them at that email if you have any extra questions or things to address. So just wanted to point that out in case anybody's not looking at the chat.
Cool, and that's everything. So we can open up to a Q&A.
Yes, yes.
People have additional
Thank you.
questions.
This was great. Every time I always think, oh, I know a lot, but then every time I sit through one of these, I always learn something new. Like the alcohol, for example. I think that's the first time I've heard that. Um, I did just have a little simple question, like socks. What type of socks should you prepare for, in winter cycling?
Did you say socks?
Socks.
Yes.
Socks. Um, Personally, I love wool socks, like merino wool, because it's a little bit warmer even when it gets wet.
Okay.
And sometimes no matter how much you've planned for it, like I'm wearing fully waterproof pants, like waterproof boots, everything. Sometimes things get wet, and I find that merino wool as a material is really good. There's a lot of different brands that work them, like Smart Wool and like Columbia makes a wool socks. I don't find that you need like cycling specific socks unless you're wearing cycling specific shoes that like clip into your bike. Um, but for as far as like commuting, just regular warm socks is good. And
Okay.
I think merino wool is a great material for that.
I personally, I have some like compression socks, and I actually like putting on sort of compression socks in the winter, especially on a really cold day. I just feel like it makes me feel less cold for some reason. Also, compression socks tend to be a little bit of like the fancier socks in your drawer, and made from better materials and things like that. Um, in our office, like we keep a pack of like real, I think they're like Target brand white socks, because the truth is that like you can have the fanciest socks in the world, but when you step in a puddle at the intersection by accident, your foot's going to be wet unless you're fully booted up or whatever. And so a dry sock is better than a fancy wet sock. So extra socks in the office is definitely a big must for me.
Okay.
Okay,
And
I see question. Yeah.
also there's a lot of the employer locations where people work, they have like a wash bay for the bikes. Do you just recommend that, especially in the wintertime, that they just wash their bike down before, putting them into one of the bike lock type areas?
If there's a washing area for the bike, that is such a that would be a great thing to do. I personally didn't mention it because um, I don't have one of those, and I keep my bike semi outside. So when it's freezing, I can't really wash it that well. When you can't wash it because you don't have like an indoor situation and you're afraid of it freezing, um, it's good to have a like simple degreaser cleaner. We use Simple Green, something like that, and a rag to like spray it on, so that way you can wipe it and wipe it off. That way you don't have to deal with like a bunch of water and then things freezing on your bike. So in the wintertime, I tend to use a rag and Simple Green and just wipe down all the vital components. You just don't want to put that on the brakes again, so isopropyl alcohol for the brakes. Um, and then for your chain, um, there's definitely ways to clean it. There are the best is bike specific materials. There is like chain cleaner, and it's a bit of a degreaser. It's a bit of a lot of them are sprays, so there's a propellant and like a very basic oil in it so that it cleans it out a little better. There's other ways to clean it with like mineral spirits, but it's really messy. So using a bike specific chain cleaner and just trying to like spray it directly onto the chain, not onto anything else on the bike. You want to like avoid getting that on the frame, depending on what your frame is made of or like the paint. Um, so it'll help. Honestly, I find that keeping a chain clean during the winter is a Sisyphean impossible process. But using a chain cleaner on just like to get it as good as you can, and then once the weather gets better, giving it the proper clean that it deserves. It'll help for certain, and then you always want to lubricate the chain after, and then dry, like wipe it dry afterwards. If that answers the question.
Any more questions in the chat?
It's a good question.
Okay. Yeah, navigating ice. So first thing, in general, in the wintertime, when you can't see that well, go slower. Like the number one thing is whatever you're trying to handle at 20 miles an hour, you'll be so much better at handling it at 10. So put in some extra time just in case. But so preventing slipping, giving yourself twice as much reaction time to seeing if there's ice in front of you, that'll help for certain. Keeping up, making sure your visibility is good, because a lot of preventing the slip is just knowing what's coming up. And then I have ridden, you can ride over ice safely. And the number one things that you want to do is if you like, say there's ice in front of me, I've noticed it, there's not enough room or time to like navigate around it, and I know I'm going to ride over it. What I do is you don't want to brake, you don't want to turn, and you don't want to speed up. What I do is I ease up a little bit, you want to relax, and just keep going exactly as you're going. So make sure you're balanced on the bike, you're not like leaning off to the side, because if you're leaning off to the side, your center of gravity might slip. So you just relax, get yourself up straight, and just roll over it. Because as long as you're safe enough to roll over it, and you're not adding an acceleration, you're not like spinning the wheel faster, you're not slamming on the brakes, because if you slam on the brakes, then there's no movement. You're just inviting yourself to slip. You just want to keep the roll. You want to rely on as much of that contact with the ice as you're getting, because there is a little bit of friction. You are able to stay up. But number one thing is just go a little slower, take it easy, and relax as you go over it.
I have one other piece of advice that I learned through personal experience, and this isn't going to be an option for everyone, but it is very real. I've fallen on ice twice in Boston on bikes, and one time it went super okay, and one time it didn't go that okay. And the difference was the bike that I was riding. Um, in the time that it didn't go okay, I was riding a single speed bike with a flat bar at the top. So if you see this picture, of the deck, you can see that this is more of a step through, like a Dutch style bike. And so when you come off the seat, it's easy to get onto your 2 feet. And so the second time that I slipped, I was riding one of my bikes that was a step through, and the bike slipped and I landed on my feet. And the only reason I was able to do that is because that bar wasn't there. And it made me realize, I was like, oh, it actually is a little bit safer to ride a step through in the winter, because if you lose traction, it's a lot easier to sort of handle, getting yourself safely to the ground. And so that was not something I had really thought about until it literally had happened to me.
Yeah, that actually does bring me to um, another thought about if you are slipping, like if you're going, it is helpful to learn how to fall on a bike. And the number one thing that I think is like the thing to learn, is a lot of times when if you're falling and you don't like know what that's like, it's easy to tense up and grip the bike, hold on tight and like go down with the ship. Um, and this is obviously tough advice, because a little bit of it is just it takes practice to relax as you fall. But some of the best advice for falling on a bicycle is to let go of it. Like just let it go, let it slide away from you, because if it slides out from under you, it's easier for you to roll safely or like land safely, um, without the bike also in the picture. So I'm not sure if that's like quite helpful, but like in the worst case, if you do slip, if you know it's happening, um, just like that's also why I say like go a little slower, just relax as you're on the ice. Because if you're relaxed, you can let go of it. You just like bring your arms up and you roll when you land. It's easier to do that relaxed than tensed up and holding onto the bike.
One thing that Colette has mentioned a few times that I'm like a big believer in is it will take you longer to get places in the winter and when there's like, road conditions than it does during the summer. So if you're leaving for work and it normally takes 12 minutes or whatever, it's going to take like to do it safely, it's going to take like 15 to 16 minutes or whatever, maybe longer than that. Don't like plan your day around being able to get everywhere at the same speed, because what that does is, and anyone who rides, they know this. When you start getting antsy, you start in a hurry, you're not paying attention to what's on the ground as much. You're trying to make lights, you're doing things that are like a little bit irresponsible in order to get there faster. And you just cannot proceed through the winter under the assumption that you can get places all at the same time. That is where the trouble begins. So I highly recommend, when you're thinking, when do I need to leave home? Remember, it is winter or there is snow on the ground. This could take longer. One of your routes that you normally take might be impassable. Just don't put yourself in a hurry. Everyone, is there make for the most part makes pretty good rational decisions about their safety. But putting yourself in a hurry to begin with is kind of what, can get you out of your element and is where bad things happen.
Right, right. I think that's a great way to end the presentation. Lexi, did we get to all of the questions?
Looks like they already answered all the questions in the chat. They did very well with doing that.
Good, good, good. So again, thank you, Worth and Colette. I just want to make sure that, everyone is, if there's further questions that you may have, you can always contact the City of Watertown, Zeke Mermel, Bike and Ped Committee, Live Well Watertown, or the Watertown TMA, because we are all in partnership with these bike series. So we are, here to answer questions, direct you in whatever way that we can. As Worth and Colette stated earlier in the presentation, NEMO is coming to Watertown, so this is great. We've been chasing them for a couple of years now, so it is great that they're finally here. I think that this service is one that everyone would appreciate. And so with that, we will close it out. And there is probably a brief little questionnaire or survey that we want you to take. If you do that, we would definitely appreciate it. Everyone have a good afternoon.